When the cops told me to leave the HOA's lake, I couldn't help but laugh. Not because it was funny, but because that lake they were defending so proudly, it was mine. I owned it. The water, the land beneath it, the very place where that smug woman thought she ruled over everyone. That moment was when I decided this battle was far from over. My name's Theo Blackstone. I'm 58 years old, widowed, and I've lived by Pine Ridge Lake for over 20 years. My house is a small log cabin built by my grandfather, surrounded by oak trees and the sound of cicadas. It's peaceful quiet, just the way I like it. The lake's always been my sanctuary. It's where I taught my nephew to fish, where I spread my wife Sarah's ashes, and where I've spent nearly every sunrise since she passed. So imagine my surprise when one morning a woman I'd never seen before pulled up in her pristine white BMW wearing heels so sharp they could pierce a tire and said, "Sir, you're trespassing on HOA property." That was my introduction to Margaret Wyndham, your textbook Karen. Perfectly styled blonde hair, clipboard in hand, a smile as fake as her tan. She had just moved into the big house across the lake, and apparently within a week she'd formed a homeowners association. She called it the Pine Ridge Lake HOA, and she named herself president. "Ma'am," I said calmly, reeling in my fishing line, "I've been on this lake since you were still using training wheels. This is my land." She narrowed her eyes. "That's not possible. All lakefront properties fall under the new HOA jurisdiction. You'll receive a letter soon." And sure enough, 2 days later, I did. A neatly printed notice with an embossed seal claiming I owed membership dues for access to her lake $200 a month. I laughed at first. Then I read the fine print. Failure to comply, it said, could result in restricted access, property fines, and possible legal action. That's when the irritation started simmering. I wrote her back politely explaining that my land deed predates her entire development by 50 years. A week later, she had the nerve to tape a private HOA property, no trespassing sign to a tree near my dock. I ripped it down. The next morning I found 3 more. This woman was relentless. She started patrolling the area like a warden, snapping photos of my house, my boat, even my old dog sitting by the porch. She'd send me these violation letters claiming my boathouse wasn't aesthetically compliant. I ignored her until the day she called the cops. I was waist-deep in the water casting my line when I heard tires crunching gravel. 2 officers stepped out. Behind them, standing proudly with her arms crossed, was Margaret. "Sir," one of the officers said, "we've had a report of trespassing." I stared at them. "Trespassing on my own property?" Margaret smiled sweetly. "This lake is under HOA management officer. He refuses to pay dues. We've warned him several times." "Ma'am," I said slowly, "do you know what you're doing right now? You're calling law enforcement on the property owner." She waved her hand. "That's for the county to decide." The officers were polite. They asked for my ID, looked confused, and eventually told me to clear the area until ownership could be verified. Watching them drive off, leaving Margaret standing there with that smug little smirk, I felt something snap inside me. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table looking over the old papers I kept in a wooden box property. Deeds, maps, tax receipts. The cabin and the land were mine, all right, but what about the lake? I suddenly wasn't so sure. For a moment I wondered if maybe I was in the wrong. Maybe there'd been some zoning change, some legal loophole that made her right. The thought made my stomach twist. Sarah would have told me to let it go to keep the peace. But then I remembered her words. "Theo, don't ever let anyone take what's yours." So the next morning I drove into town and went straight to the county recorder's office. A clerk named Joyce helped me dig through decades of dusty records. We found it my grandfather's original land deed from 1958, and tucked in the back was something that changed everything. Subsurface mineral rights, including the lake bed and water surface extending 30 feet from shore. I didn't just own the cabin, I owned the lake. Margaret had no idea she was standing on my property when she called the cops on me. The next day I decided to let her keep digging her own grave. Sure enough, she escalated. She started fining other neighbors $50 a day for garden decorations, $200 for improper fencing, even $1,000 for a family who parked their kayak too close to her dock. People were furious, but too intimidated to fight back. She installed cameras along the shore, sent letters threatening legal action, even built a fence blocking off the main public trail to the lake. It was like living under a dictatorship. That's when I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. I spent the next week building a case. Joyce from the recorder's office helped me compile every document proving my ownership. I even hired a surveyor to map out the lake's boundaries. The results were crystal clear. Everything within that shoreline, every inch Margaret called HOA property, was mine. But I wanted to make sure her downfall was public. When I heard she was hosting a special HOA meeting to officially register the lake under HOA jurisdiction, I knew it was my moment. She'd invited county officials, the sheriff, and all the residents. She even brought a local reporter, planning to make it her crowning moment. The meeting was held at the Pine Ridge Community Hall, a bright white building overlooking the water. By the time I arrived, Margaret was already at the front, her PowerPoint projected on the wall. She was in full performance mode, talking about improving the community, protecting the lake, and removing unauthorized users. I sat quietly in the back until she said my name, and finally she announced we need to discuss the continued non-compliance of Mr. Blackstone, who refuses to cooperate with our HOA regulations. His repeated trespassing and hostility have forced us to involve law enforcement. "Hold up," I said, standing. "You mean the lake I own?" Every head turned. Margaret froze for half a second but recovered fast. "You don't own this lake, Mr. Blackstone. Please sit down." I walked forward slow and steady, a small leather folder in hand. "Actually, I think you'll want to see this." I set the documents on the table, flipping one open for the audience to see the deed dated 1958 stamped with the county seal. "This," I said, my voice calm but sharp, "is the original deed for this property, including the lake, the bed beneath it, and the access surrounding it. I pay taxes on it every single year. You can check with the county clerk." You could hear a pin drop. Joyce, bless her soul, had come too. She stood up from the back of the room and said, "He's telling the truth. The Blackstone family owns the entire lake, legally. The HOA has no claim over it." Margaret's face drained of color. She stammered, That's not possible. These people need leadership." "Leadership?" I laughed. "You mean extortion? You've been charging innocent folks for something you don't even own. You lied, forged letters, and called the cops on me on my own land." Murmurs spread through the crowd. One man shouted, "She fined me for my kayak." Another said, "She made me pay for a fishing permit." Margaret's hands trembled. "You're all ungrateful. I was trying to improve this community." "By stealing from it?" I asked. Her clipboard slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a loud crack. She glanced around, realizing no one was on her side anymore. The sheriff cleared his throat and said, "Ma'am, you might want to come with me. There's going to be an investigation." She tried to storm out, but the reporter blocked her path, shoving a microphone toward her face. Cameras flashed. People whispered. Margaret pushed past them, muttering something about lawyers and defamation, but everyone knew it was over. Within a week, the county forced the HOA to dissolve. All the private property signs came down. The fences were removed. And Margaret's house listed for sale within a month. Rumor has it she moved 2 states away. As for me, I finally got my lake back. The peace, the quiet, the reflection of dawn on still water, it was mine again. Sometimes I still see the faint white marks on the trees where her signs used to be, but they don't bother me anymore. They're just scars, reminders of a battle I didn't start, but damn sure finished. A few weeks later, the neighbors threw a little gathering by the shore. They asked me to make a sign, something to replace all the HOA property warnings. I carved it myself from an old piece of oak and hung it near the dock. It reads, "Blackstone Lake, all welcome. Fish responsibly." Now when I sit there with a line in the water watching the sunset turn the lake to gold, I think about how close I came to losing it, not because someone could take it, but because I almost gave up. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Power only works when people are too scared to challenge it. And once you stop being afraid, their power ends right where your courage begins.